Rockdale County deputies responded to a shooting. It was at the Lake St. James apartment complex in Conyers. Upon deputies' arrival, they observed the black male, lying on the ground suffering from a gunshot.
Now, what happened that night to rapper Trouble wasn't random, it was definitely personal. And at the center of this tragedy was a woman and her jealous ex.
A spokesperson says Orr was visiting a female friend when the suspect, now identified as Jamichael Jones, forced his way into the apartment and fired that fatal shot.
He broke into the apartment, walked in on his ex, lying in bed next to the rapper, and didn't hesitate. He took him out right there on the spot.
I believe his name was Trouble. He is an Atlanta rapper, was visiting a female friend at the complex. And Mr. Jamichael Jones did know the female, and it was a domestic situation.
And this ain't about blaming women. It's about recognizing how dangerous emotions like jealousy can be. And as a man, you gotta move wisely, especially when we're laying our head down in someone else's space. Mario Samante Orr, better known as Trouble, or Scoob, was a 34-year-old rapper from Atlanta. He first gained recognition back in 2011 with a track called Bussin', which later featured heavy hitters like Yo Gotti, Waka Flocka, and Trey the Truth on a remix. Trouble was a rapper who carved out his own lane. He found success early on and maintained a solid presence in the game, collaborating with some extremely big names, including The Weeknd. It was on June 5th, 2022, however, that Trouble's life came to a tragic end. That night, he made what he had no way of knowing would be a fatal decision, choosing to sleep next to a woman whose jealous, obsessive ex still hadn't let her go. That man returned to the same apartment they once shared, and in the very bed where he used to be intimate with her was now another man, rapper Trouble. And what happened next would eventually change everything. Just a few hours before tragedy struck, Trouble was in his hometown of Atlanta. At some point that evening, he decided to head over to the residence of a woman he was dating. The residence was in the Lake St. James apartment complex, located at 50th Street, James Drive in Conyers, Georgia, a quiet suburban area on the outskirts of Atlanta. Trouble eventually pulled up to the spot, and at first, everything was all good until it wasn't. Because while Trouble and the unnamed woman were sleeping in that apartment, death was creeping around the corner. Jamichael Jones, the woman's ex-boyfriend, who she had been in a relationship with for over 3 years, was on his way to that apartment. They had history, a deep emotional connection that had clearly turned toxic, and even though they were no longer together, Jamichael hadn't let go of her. At 3:14 a.m., surveillance footage captured the vehicle Mr. Jones was driving as it entered the Lake St. James apartment complex, the same place he used to live with her. Jamichael broke into the apartment while the woman in Trouble were asleep in the bedroom. She woke up to her ex-boyfriend standing over her, and then he ended up punching her in the face. At that point, everything escalated. Trouble had woken up, and Jamichael's focus quickly shifted from his ex to Trouble. The two men eventually began fighting. The unnamed woman tried to intervene, but things escalated fast. At approximately 3:20 a.m. that morning, Jamichael Jones pulled out a handgun and shot Trouble in the chest during this fight. By 3:21 a.m., surveillance footage captured Jones leaving the apartment complex, just 1 minute after pulling the trigger. Shortly after the shooting, police received a 911 call from a woman who reported hearing another female resident screaming for help inside one of the apartments. Officers eventually arrived on the scene, entered the unit, and discovered a black male in his 30s suffering from a GSW to the chest, a gunshot wound. He was later identified as 34-year-old Mario Samante Orr, known professionally as Musician Trouble. Trouble, who was already believed to have died from the gunshot wound, was rushed to Rockdale County Piedmont Hospital, where he was later that morning officially pronounced dead. At the scene, investigators recovered a spent .40 caliber shell casing, but no firearm. The woman reportedly had visible injuries on her face, a clear sign that the altercation started with her. Authorities immediately launched an investigation, and that's when the story started to unfold. First off, Trouble and the shooter had never even met prior to that night. This wasn't some personal beef between the two men. This was a man who simply couldn't let go of his ex, and the woman confirmed it herself. The shooter was her former boyfriend. Jamichael Jones and the woman had once been in a committed relationship that lasted over 3 years. In fact, not only had they lived together in the same apartment where Trouble was killed, but she had broken up with Jamichael Jones just 1 week before the shooting. So this breakup was very fresh. And whether Trouble knew what he was, walking into or not, well, that could change the way you look at this. If, let's say, she didn't tell Trouble about their past together, should the woman carry some moral accountability for what happened that night? And that's a question to both the men and the women who are listening to this. Really curious to hear what you guys have to say. For further context, the woman told investigators that she ended things with Jamichael just a week earlier, after he hit her during an argument about not having a job and failing to help with the bills. During this one particular incident that turned violent, the woman said Jamichael punched her in the nose during an argument inside a car. She told investigators that she called 911 immediately after, and Jamichael ended up fleeing the scene. According to her, she hadn't seen him ever since, and claimed he hadn't returned to the apartment after that incident. What makes this story even more unexpected is that Jamichael Jones wasn't just some random guy. Back in the day, he went by the name of J. Mike and was affiliated with Brick Squad. He even appeared in music videos alongside the late Slim Duncan and Waka Flocka. At one point, Jamichael was a part of the same Atlanta rap scene that Trouble came up in. But while Trouble built something for himself and carved out a real career, Jamichael faded into the background. He never made it. And in the end, a man who couldn't find success in the rap game took the life of someone who actually did find that success. I find that very tragic. And on top of that, according to some unverified reports, including a claim made by rapper Young Jock, Jamichael's name was still on the lease to that apartment.
But the man's name is on the lease, allegedly. That's what I've heard. That's what's out there.
Now, this claim hasn't been officially verified, but it wouldn't be too far-fetched. I mean, they had lived together in that apartment for over 3 years and had just broken up a week before Trouble got killed by Jamichael. Using surveillance footage and witness testimony, detectives were able to link 33-year-old Jamichael Jones to the shooting. Police quickly issued a bolo, a be on the lookout, and began taking steps to track him down. They eventually visited Jones' mother, and while they were there, Jamichael called her phone. She handed the phone to investigators and helped connect her son with the authorities. Less than a day later, he turned himself in. But before that, Jones told deputies he'd meet them near Southern Regional Medical Center in Clay County. Jones was eventually arrested shortly after and charged with murder, aggravated assault, home invasion, and battery in connection to the death of rapper Trouble. He was booked into the Rockdale County Jail without bond, and that's where he remained in custody since his arrest in the summer of 2022, awaiting trial. Jury selection for Jamichael Jones' murder trial was scheduled to begin just a couple weeks ago in late March. But in an unexpected twist, Jones entered a negotiated guilty plea to a reduced charge of voluntary manslaughter. As a part of the deal, the more serious charges were dropped. He's now set to spend the next 20 years of his life behind bars for the killing of rapper Trouble. So a precious life was lost, all because this man walked in and found another man, rapper Trouble, in the same bed he once shared with his ex. Honestly, it's a wild story, but more than that, it's a reminder of just how fast everything can change when emotions take over. I don't know if Trouble knew about the history between this woman and her ex, but as a man, if you're planning on spending the night at a woman's place, you should gather as much information as possible. Information like who she used to be with, how recent the breakup was, whether the ex is a trigger-happy demon who might still, be in the picture, all that important stuff. On the real though, this whole situation was incredibly unfortunate, and it definitely put a spotlight on the woman's role in it. The question is, how much accountability should she really be held to? Obviously, she couldn't have predicted this would happen. The guy who killed Trouble was just a crazy person, right? So I don't think it's fair to put it on her, especially since we don't know the full extent of her relationship with Jamichael outside of what was mentioned in official court documents. That aside, if you got an ex who's already putting hands on you and y'all used to live in that apartment together and you just broke up with him about a week ago, having another man over probably isn't you thinking about his best interest, and I'll just leave it at that. But I'll say this, as a man, it's your responsibility to make sure you're safe in any situation involving a woman, because at the end of the day, it's better to be safe than sorry. You're the only one who's going to care about your safety as much as you. It's really sad that Trouble found himself caught in the middle of all this and ultimately lost his life because of it. If anything, I think this story serves as a lesson, a reminder to move carefully, ask questions, and protect yourself at all costs. If you made it this far, you can't leave this video without dropping a little like on it, okay? Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you're new here, my name is Blacky Speaks. Nice to meet you, and thank you so much for subscribing. Welcome to the family. Any thoughts on this story surrounding rapper Trouble sleeping next to this woman and losing his life? And a very controversial question, what do you guys think about when it comes to the woman in this story? Should she be held accountable? That's a question to both the men and the women who are watching this right now. Very curious to hear what you guys have to say, and I'll catch you guys in the comment section below, but most importantly of all, catch you guys in the next video. Peace. I'm out.